Hi, my name's Chris. I'm a field service engineer with OSIsoft, and I'm back to show you how to upgrade your 34380.70 64-bit server to a PI 2012 server. So you might be joining us here if you were already running on a 64-bit operating system, but if you started at a 32-bit operating system, you should have seen the video prior to this one where we moved our 32-bit server to a 64-bit Windows and made it a 64-bit PI server. So the first thing we want to do is to get AF installed. But in order to install AF, we need our backend, which is SQL. And if we're going to put a SQL server on the PI server, we want to use the Express Edition. Conveniently, we make that available at the download site. I've already downloaded it. We also have a white paper on how you should go about installing SQL Server Express Edition if you're going to put it on your PI server. So I would highly recommend downloading that white paper in order to make sure you install everything correctly. There's some new features in SQL Server 2012 that we won't be taking advantage of, so you can turn those off even though they're part of the default install. So I've started up my SQL Server install here, and we'll just run through this. I'm keeping all the defaults right now, so I've enabled some features that aren't actually required for AF, but that's okay, it won't hurt anything. So it's telling me that some of the files that it wanted to update were in use, and I'm going to need to reboot to complete the setup. So we're back after the reboot. We can install AF. When I moved my AF install kits over to my server, I put them all into a zip file, so I just need to unzip them first. Let's wait a few seconds while they extract. Now in my folder I have the install kit for AF Server 2012. And I'll just let it unzip wherever it likes. Fill in the name and organization fields. Install all of the components. Make sure the SQL Server name's correct, and you're ready to install. So we want to just check and make sure AF's running, and we'll do that from the services applet. So if we come down to the PI section of services, we can see that AF Server 2 has started. We're going to need that because we have to make a connection to AF when we install our PI server. So once again, we want to do our health checks before we run the upgrade, because we want to make sure that everything is healthy before we start any large operations. So I'm going to check my message logs. I'm going to raise the severity level up to warning, and I want to see messages that are at a high severity level. And I can see that I have some failed to find archive file messages. Those are actually left over from my move because I didn't bring over the empty archives, but the archive list still thinks they ought to be there. So we can fix that pretty quickly by just going and creating two empty archives that have the correct names as they're listed here in the messages. So from the archives plugin, I hit the new archive button, and they were pyarch.002 and pyarch.003 that were supposed to be registered. And then I won't see those errors anymore. So again, we don't require that you be completely free of errors, but you'd like to make sure you know that any errors you find aren't going to impact your upgrade. So we found the source of those and fixed it. We're going to check data flow. So I want to see that data is going through the snapshot successfully, not queued, and making its way into the archive. Another good way to check your snapshots is just to look at current values. So I am getting data from my interface right now, which is good. And I can see data in process book as well. Let me make a trend for the data that's coming in from my OPC interface. And what I really want to see is that the old data is there and I can see it. So we'll just use process book for that. And I'm going to look at a year ago today. Well, a year ago yesterday, which is actually the day that my server was created. So as I scoot forward in time, I'll be able to see more data. And the important part is that I've confirmed that all of my historical data is available and it renders okay. So now back on the Pi server, I would like to know if my interfaces are going to buffer. Bear with me, I know I've explained this a couple times before, but I'll explain it again for people joining us at this stage. When we run pybuffss-qs, we want to look at the total reads and writes. They should be a positive number. If we don't see reads and writes, then the data is not actually going through the buffer. We did see that the data was going through the buffer. We can shut down our server. Now that the server is down, I want to isolate my Pi server from the network. After the upgrade, we're going to start the Pi server, but I want to make sure everything works correctly before I allow the interfaces to connect and empty their buffers. Because if there were anything wrong when that happened, I would lose the data. So the easy way to do this is to just firewall the Pi server. So when I turn on this firewall, nothing's going to be able to connect to it externally. There's a few other ways this could be done. For example, if you're sitting in front of the machine, you could pull out the network cable. You could ask your corporate firewall people to turn on the firewall, or you could use the Pi firewall. But Pi needs to be on to configure that. So we're ready to run our upgrade, and the upgrade's quite simple actually. We just run the install kit for the new version of the server that we'd like to use. So there's my Pi 2012 install kit. So I need to provide it the name of my AF server and actually make a successful connection before it'll allow me to upgrade. I was not able to connect. I know there's a reason for this. Oh yes, my stop script stopped AF. So I'll need to start that back up so that I can connect to it. So we've connected. Do we want to enable the Pi module database? Yes. It's asking us a number of security questions here. Do we want to disable explicit logins? And yes, we think disabling explicit logins is an excellent idea, but in my opinion, it's much easier to manage your security changes after your upgrade's complete. So we're going to leave all the security stuff exactly the same, and then we can change it afterwards. So the next thing we need to do is run the MDB to AF preparation wizard. So we need to synchronize your module database to AF, and in order to do that, we need to have any accounts that can edit the module database be associated with a Windows username so that we know what Windows username to attach to the elements that get created in AF. We also need to know what database you would like to sync to in AF, and it will suggest a module it thinks you ought to use. So it's telling me that the module that I want to use to sync to doesn't exist. That's okay. It is going to attempt to create it and start the PI server for me. It wants a reboot. Let me just save what I was working on here, and then we can reboot. While I'm rebooting, I came over to look at my buffers to watch data queuing up, but the PI server will be back soon enough. The buffers are in good shape, data is queuing. So we log on to our server. Our upgrade should be complete. We're now running PI Server 2012. We'd like to check our message logs. We'll only have a few minutes of messages because we've only, well, at least as PI Server 2012, we'll only have a few minutes of messages. Check to make sure all the services are running. Check my version. And I check the archive and snapshot statistics to make sure that I'm actually archiving data successfully. Again, snapshots are a good way to see if data is coming through. So I'm looking at data from the random interface right now because that data comes in even while the server is disconnected from the network. And I can see that my snapshots are clearly from since I started this server up. Of course, new data is important, old data is also important, so I'm going to check for archive data. So I'm looking for data from last September. My server is only about a year old, but last September will give me a good idea that I have my archives online and working. So everything looks good. Let's open up the firewall and let the interface reconnect. So off to the interface node, and we can see right now the current queue events is dropping to 0. That means the interface is pushing all of its data to the PI server after it reconnects. So now we can see my current queue events are 0. All the data is on the PI server. So we're running PI Server 2012, 64-bit. We also want to make sure that the MDBAF link actually works. So we can check the status here, and if this light is green, then we believe it's working, but there's nothing better than a test. So if I want to check to make sure these two things are syncing, all I need to do is create an object in each place. So I'm going to create a module in the module database and see if it makes it to AF. And then I'll create an element in AF and see if it makes its way to the module database. I just happen to have PI System Explorer on my interface node, so that's where I'm going to use it from. So you can see already that the element from module database is there. I'm going to create an element here called from AF, and within a few seconds it should be synchronized to the module database on my PI server. Let's refresh this. There's really nothing like seeing it work to make you feel confident. So our old server only had one hard drive, but the new one has two. And we like that a lot better because we don't like having things that can eat disk space living on the same hard drive as the operating system. So what we want to do is move our things that can eat disk space, notably the archives and the queues, to the spare drive. So I've just changed my auto archive file route to point to the E drive so that when new archives get created, they'll get created on the E drive rather than the C drive. So I'm going to force a shift to test and make sure that actually worked. I would never want to edit this tuning parameter and not be 100% sure it worked correctly. So there we go. I have a new archive on the E drive. Eventually I'd probably want to move all of my old data as well. But we just shifted archives, and that means there's probably some data coming in ready to go into the archive we just shifted out of. If I take that archive online, that data will have no place to go. So it's better to wait until there's very little chance of data coming in for that archive before I unregister it to move it. So there I just changed the tuning parameter that controls my queue location. And I'm going to make the folder for my queues on the E drive. And this will take effect next time the snapshot and archive subsystems are restarted. So normally that would just be the next time you restart your server, but just to check this, I'm going to go ahead and start and stop them now. So I stop the snapshot and the archive and I start them back up again, and now I can see my event queues are located on my E drive, which means that as data comes in, it's only going to consume disk space on the E drive. Finally, we'd like to make sure that we have backups of our new server. So the first thing I'm going to do is install my nightly backup task. So I just need to feed it a location and run the install flag, and then it will create a scheduled task for me. I always forget the task scheduler is not in the control panel anymore. It's under administrative tools. So there we go, task scheduler. And I should be able to see my new task that was created, and I'm going to run it. And I want to run it right now so that I'll have a backup of this new server that I've just created, because I don't have any good way to roll back to my old server at this point. So it's important that we take an upgrade as soon, or we take a backup as soon as our upgrade is successful. While we're doing this, we could clean up the old files we brought over from the older server, since we're pretty sure we're successful at this point. So if I just wanted to make some free disk space. Now let's have a look at our backup. So pyrtool-backup-query tells me whether or not there's a backup in progress. And since it says there's no backup in progress, that must mean mine is done. I'm checking to make sure it did a backup of my SQL server. It only does that if your SQL server is on the same machine as your PI server. And AF would also be on the same machine in that case. So the backup looks good, and the AF backup worked, but let me just check up how many archives I have. See, that's not near enough archives. I had, I believe, 6 archives with data in them, and I would like backups of all of those. The problem is that our backups are incremental, and the backup subsystem that we brought over from the old server doesn't know we're on a new machine where all that other backup has disappeared. So the solution is just to run the manual backup through the backup plugin in System Management Tools and tell it to back up all of the old archives, and then we'll finally have a backup that would be good enough to restore the server from. So our backup's complete. We can come and look and see we have all of our archives that we need. Much better. So that's all there is to it. The upgrade is actually the easy part of this process. We're now running PI Server 2012 64-bit.